Andrew will start with you.
Andrew Henniett, attorney for the committee.
Kenny Dubey, superintendent.
Erin Earl, school committee chair.
Jennifer Lima, school committee member.
Rob Mezzanotte, assistant superintendent.
Okay, awesome. First on the list is citizens' comments. Do we have anybody who'd like to speak? Okay, next is approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, just for clarification, voting members are Mr. Mezzanotte, Dr. Duba, Dr. Earl, and myself. So as for the agenda, we have several policies which are likely not all going to be discussed this evening, but we wanted to have them all on there so that we had the option of discussing them. Our hope is to, have these policies taken care of before the start of the school year. Ken, do you have a preference on the order that we go in?
I would just go in order of what's on here.
Okay, so, I had kind of, made some notes on these. So the grading policies, when we had seen these the last time, the idea was to have a long-term and a short-term policy brought back to us in May. That didn't happen, so we're seeing these again for the first time. Do we have a short-term plan for these? The long-term plan was to have a committee put together once the school year started, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so if we go in and, sorry, I closed out. There are, suggestions and notes in here for us to review on the policies right now for tonight. As far as long-term, we had talked about getting a committee together, so that is something we will do at the start of the year. Mr. Mezzanotte and I were talking about that. Obviously during the summer, it's hard to bring teachers together because everyone is off, but it is something we will do and we will work on. And I'll just want to point out, changing a grading policy is not something that we can take lightly or do quickly. So we did make some just minor suggestions in here as far as the grading policy for now, and then we will convene a committee during the school year to look at both policies. And one thing we were talking about is just looking to combine, so we just have a grading policy for the district and not different policies based on grade levels, but within one policy we can state, elementary, middle, and high within that. So if we look at the middle school, we do have some suggestions in here to strike some of the language, just because it's outdated.
So for the short term, while we wait for that, are you recommending we make the changes that are in here?
Yes, so when we look at the purpose for middle school policy, we did change the Common Core standards that are referring to the new standards that are on the record website. And then under philosophy,
Which one are we in?
the
Sorry,
middle
the
school
6th
grading
grade.
policy.
Okay, great.
I don't know if we want to refer to the years. It just says in 2010, 2011. I think I would just say, this is the, the vision right now. And then when we bring the form a committee, we can relook at what that vision would be for K to 12.
So, yeah, so I agree with Dr. Duba that we should update the things that are technically wrong right now. And then it definitely convene. So for some of these notes, Rob, for the passing grade one, I know you made the note that the high school is different.
Yeah.
Is that something that you wanna explore or change? You know
I
what
think
I
we
mean?
need to explore.
Yeah,
I made some comments as
Yep.
I was going through both of the policies, the middle school and the high school. I don't recommend the comments or questions that I've put in there being changed immediately. I
Mhm.
think it should be done through a proper committee and process to discuss, especially some of the things around passing grades and you know, multiple attempts, things like that with regard to summative assessments. I think these are necessary conversations, but I think that it should be part of a process that's more formalized than what we've had so far.
So what I remember of our conversation, hi Shivali, you perfect timing, was that there were some things that we felt needed to be changed immediately, kind of like the things we just highlighted about the standards that are incorrect. And then some things that are current practices which are either not reflected in the policy or current practices that are stated in the policy but aren't actually happening. And so those were the types of things that we wanted to immediately make changes to, with the other things that are highlighted here, which are more like philosophical, and, you know, mindset shifts were the things that would be addressed longer. But I don't see any of those types of practice issues noted here.
Practice issues meaning things that are done currently but are not reflected in the policy.
Right. Shivali, do you remember those conversations?
Yeah, so I don't know if they are set as comments in there, but there's a list of them that we shared with you guys.
Yeah,
I can
so
go over
the list that you shared is captured in the comments.
Okay.
Okay? I know that, like, so Shivali can speak to this more, but like, I know that she had conversations with her team at the high school to talk about the policy and to talk about some of the concerns that that were in the policy that teachers had. I do think, I respect that process, but I also think that, like, the conversation has sort of further reaching implications. You know what I mean? Especially when we're talking about middle school. Like, just personally, I don't think middle school and high school should have separate grading policies. You know what I mean? I think we should have one grading policy. That's just my personal feeling, because it's all obviously connected. I think that most of what Shivali shared with me about her discussions are things that I could get behind, but I also think that it needs to be part of, I just think it needs to be part of a more formal process personally, because even if they are things that we know are best practice and that are done very commonly among teachers, I still think there needs to be a proper communication to some of these things, because they significantly impact kids, you know? So I do think that, like, I don't know, I guess I'm more in favor of more of a wider conversation, if you will, between both middle school and high school together.
I think I'm concerned, from a timeline standpoint, because it was cold, like, this has been almost, I know where we are transition wise and stuff with, like, administration, but I think I'm worried because I believe
February.
we're not, like, this isn't being followed right now, and I don't like when policies aren't being followed, even if the policy's bad, and so I think that's my concern about, like, not moving forward on anything. And we don't have to today, but I do get nervous when we're talking about committees and different things, like, that to me is another year of having an inconsistent policy.
I will just say, when I was
Yeah.
in Jamestown and we redid our grading, it took a year.
Yeah, no, and I
it is
think,
something, just because you're revamping that entire process, and you need to involve your teaching staff, your students, your families.
so what I'm saying is, like,
looking at that.
and I totally get that part of it, but then what I'm concerned about is I know that there are things happening in our schools right now, because the administrators and the teachers have told us, that are not consistent with this policy, and that's where I feel like we have to have a middle, like, where while you all do the deep dive work about the philosophies and what we're gonna do as a district, like, there are things that are happening that if a parent called and said, like, hey, I don't understand why this happened, it's not consistent with the school committee policy, and that's what I'm concerned about, is that we are not clear on certain things, and then also there are things that are probably rightfully so for the students not being followed or being done that are not in here, and that's where I think we were getting calls from parents
Yeah.
concerned.
And that's
So-
why, like, in February, we said, we understand, like, the long-term discussions that need to be, and,
Yep.
you know, we understood, but we had hoped that in February, by May, we would have a short-term plan that would address those
Yeah,
things.
and that just isn't.
And,
So
you
the
know,
feedback that I've gotten, and if you have examples of parts of the policy that you've heard haven't been followed, I think we probably should have that discussion, because from the feedback I've received more often than not is that we have practices happening in our schools right now that are best practices, that are not included in the policy, but that are consistent with best practices that teachers should be following, that they've taken it upon themselves to do. And I'll give the example of retake assessments. You know what I mean? That's not in the policy. But I know that many of our teachers, if not most of our teachers, and Shivali can probably speak this more than me, but most of our teachers are following that type of practice because they believe in it and they know it's best interest for kids, even though the policy doesn't say that.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I've heard that more than the policy not being followed.
but that's a problem too, then, because if you have the teachers who do, for the students who have a teacher that doesn't, that's negatively impacting them.
Agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Agree
Yeah, so I think
completely.
that's where we have
Yep.
to figure out, like, we're all on the same page, I think, as far as like
Mhm.
what we, like, I don't think we are having like challenges about the what.
Yep.
It's just like again, to your point when you're saying like most, like, okay, but we need all, or it's
100%.
not fair. And so I
Absolutely.
think it's a
Yep.
couple of those things that we do need to figure out, like, what are those priorities what are those things,
Yep.
like, that we need to put in, and then, like, if it changes in a year, that's okay, but like, I do think for fairness to students, like, we have to outline those things.
Agreed.
And I'm trying to think, I'll look up the example. It was a
had to
middle
do
school
with-
example.
It had to do with remediation, I believe, was one of the things.
Yeah,
that
and
we
the
had.
math testing, like the testing into the math,
The
that
math
was another
placement,
one.
that was another one.
Yes.
And, you know, so those are a couple of the examples off the top of my head, but
I
I
don't
can
know
go
if
back
some
through.
of that would go in a grading
Yeah,
policy.
yeah.
I think when we think about grading, we're specifically
Yeah.
talking about how the
Remediation
practices that
would, though.
teachers are putting in for grading, right? And what those grades would be. You know, we're doing, you know, standards-based grading in elementary school. We're doing traditional grading in middle and high school.
Mhm.
And when we start talking about remediation, all that, I don't know if I would really say that goes into a grading
It's in the
policy.
policy.
It is
right
in the
now.
policy
Right, but
right now.
I'm just, I question, like, is that,
Yeah,
What specifically does it say about remediation?
I'm
Oh,
sure it
I got it right here. Okay.
it's on,
So
and
it
they're
says.
different, and that's.
So
part
I'm
of
looking at
it.
the high school one right now. It says, in order to receive credit for a course passing grade of 70, courses successfully remediated for credit in summer school or online will receive a grade of 70 on student's transcript. Then it gives the grading scale. Students may be afforded the opportunity to remediate a course for credit in summer school if they earned a final course between 60 and 69 and do not have more than 20 cumulative unverified absences, of course. Opportunities for course credit recovery and or remediation through online programs are also afforded to students on an individual basis, so on and so forth. So the remediation here, it seems to refer more to the course failures, basically, which I believe we are doing, yes, according to this
Course failure
language?
remediation,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
but were you
But then
referring
what's-
to like remediation within the course?
That's where I
I
think
think-
there's been some challenges, cause some teachers handle it differently.
And I think we made that suggestion here.
we don't have any in the middle school one, though.
Yeah, that's the
So
other
we
problem.
take-
Is that, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the middle school, you guys
I
from
know,
the
I
No,
high
suppose
school.
that's
you
Yeah.
do have to
that
find
was
it.
one of the phone calls.
Interesting on.
And you all definitely got this email, like, I didn't like gatekeep this, it got
No.
forwarded right along to
Yeah.
y'all when it came through.
Do you
It
have
was-
Yeah.
I was looking through
Yeah,
thousands.
the email that we got from a parent indicated that, they were asking that we request, that we would reconsider the policy because, the policy that relates to grading currently is, this is, I'm quoting from the parent, is policy is highly outdated and does not support educational research. It's misaligned to the ideals of the mastery of learning and growth mindset. It actually disincentivizes learning, much needed acquisition of learning, and continues to widen gaps year over year. It can impact absenteeism, cheating, and exacerbate already existing conditions of Maslow's hierarchy of need, anxiety, lower feelings of self-worth. In short, the school committee presents itself to value grades over learning.
That
Yeah,
was-
and philosophically, I do agree with that,
Mhm.
and I do agree that there are definitely best practices that are missing from this policy, 100%. What I would say is that, and we've discussed this before, is that to do that effectively, I think it has to go through a formal process, and I understand that process has been delayed, and I respect your feeling, your frustration with that maybe. But I do think it has to go through a formal process, because even though we know it's best practice, to just implement it without gathering a proper group together can almost like work against what you're trying to do.
And I'm not asking
Yeah.
you to do that, all I'm
Yeah.
asking is if there are practices that we are currently
Mhm.
doing in our schools that are beneficial,
Mhm.
We should get them in the policy
we
right
should
now.
put them
Agreed.
in the policy so that all students are able to have those same
Well,
Okay.
and also so that we can support teachers
Yes.
and be transparent to parents.
Yes.
Like it's multifaceted
Yes.
because
And
it just, I think, causes more confusion and questions.
Yes.
And we tried to
Yep.
do that, so if you look at some of the comments, I think the only thing I
I don't see
see
Shivali's
that-
comments, am I?
and then
the
the
wrong
Rob's
doc?
comments.
No,
that
they
I
did it
think we
together.
do
Yeah,
together.
Charlotte and I worked on this together, so.
Oh, okay.
The retake of assessment up to a 70 within a 2-week window is there. That way, you know, you don't have a teacher that allows that for, let's say, 4 weeks, but somebody else says, no retake. So we try to kind of do that. Again, long term, we may come up with something
Mhm.
more
Mhm.
different, but this is what we tried to do.
This is, in my mind, this is this school year.
Yeah,
What do we want in this policy documented so that we're clear while you all work on the long-term plan, being that we have new principals and new administration and everything. Like, that's what I'm really most concerned about. So that sounds like one that we would be able to move on, or no?
Which was
Yeah,
what you
it's
just said,
in
I'm
here.
sorry. This was the,
There's a lot in here though that are, Rob's saying like are in here but aren't, he doesn't wanna act on
Okay,
right now.
not
So for
yet.
example, like, you know what I mean, that's what I was
Yeah.
trying to differentiate.
Yep. The one thing I did see missing in here and that Rob, we discussed was the updating the makeup for unexcused absences, which is probably gonna go in 3 different places, 3 different policies. But the makeup of late assignments, just here again, once again, it talks about verified absences, but it does not talk about
Yeah, that was a big gap.
and we allow that right now, 48 hours, we give anybody 48 hours because not everybody necessarily goes to the doctor.
Mhm.
If the parent calls us, we make a note of that and then they get 48 hours.
Is
So
that
that's
in-
something.
is that under the makeup late assignments section?
Yeah, there was something that we updated in the handbook, so we wanted it to kinda like align, so we
Mhm.
just, I can add that in here, so as a comment, so people can see it.
Do you mind doing that?
Yeah, of
Okay,
course.
thank you. I know that that's a, yeah, that's an example of something that we definitely can do.
Yeah.
Like, we can definitely update that language.
And I get it, like and I also understand the importance of bringing the educators along, like
Yeah.
with the conversation, like even if everyone's agreeance, like giving them the space to talk about how they work with students in their courses, like is so important. Like I'm not trying to devalue that, but I
Mhm.
am, that example is a really good example
Right.
of making sure the handbook aligns with the policy and
Yep.
is clear for students about, hey, no, you don't have to spend $15 to go to the doctors, like you can have an
Right.
unexcused absence and still be able to make up stuff, like that's an important thing
I
for,
also think
for
too, you
folks to
can't
know.
always hold students accountable to their absence, it may not be
Completely
within their
understand.
control.
Right.
Yeah, and
Right,
so I
and that
think
was
we're all in
something we had
alignment on
talked about,
that,
making
but the
sure that
policy's not.
everyone
So if a
Correct.
teacher said, no, you can't make it up, like the school committee doesn't have anything to back up the current
I think,
practice.
I think that is,
Yeah.
that is probably the best example of something that, yes,
Mhm.
can be done without any, you know, further steps. We can approve that
Okay.
language. I think that other things that we talked about, we meaning Shivali and I, are things that have to do with like comprehensive course assessment language. Those are being phased out
Mhm.
over the next few years. So we'll have to talk about how we're going to, you know, do that. We talked about the, a minimum number of summative assessments per quarter, just to make sure that students' grades are based on a number of different opportunities. That's the language we can discuss further. We talked about the passing grade score. We have discrepancy now between high school and middle school. High
We've
school,
had
it's,
discrepancy for,
yeah,
20
so
plus
that's a
years.
conversation we can
Yeah.
have, you know what I mean? There's gonna be obviously opinions on both sides, so we can have that conversation. And then we can talk
I think that
about,
one's really important too, though.
what's that?
I think that one particularly is really important because there are, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Shivali, 2 courses at the middle school level that if they take it, it affects their high school like trajectory with algebra and Spanish. And
Mhm.
so if they got a 65 at the middle school versus like, you know, like that matters for like their credit and their
It affects
trajectory at the
their
high school.
science.
Right, and that
Science
needs
as
to be
well.
consistent,
Science
we should
and
have, that
Right.
should be consistent across the
Yeah.
board, I think that's what we go back to, is saying is, you know, we should have one grading
Yeah.
policy.
Mhm.
And then we should have these differences, cause it's not good for the
Yeah.
students, the kids, as they move from middle school to high school with the different expectations.
Yeah. But
I-
that's one that
yeah.
we have to work through with everybody? Yeah, right.
We do, we have to have the conversation. I have a little this is a nitpicky thing for me. The way we use formative assessment in our grading policy is not, it's not accurate. It's
No.
just not
Yeah.
accurate. It's not what formative assessment is. It really flies against exactly what formative assessment is defined as. So I'd like to have that conversation, you know what I mean? Because we're just misrepresenting what that word means dramatically by the way we use it in the policy. So that's another conversation we need to have.
Perfect.
Yeah.
They're
Which
gonna
I'll-
love it.
I love having a conversation. I do. I like talking about that. But I just don't like when words are not used the right way.
So for the, so just so Jen's clear on what we're gonna bring forward, cause this would be one that we'd wanna bring, if anything is changing, we wanna bring it forward to at the next school committee meeting on the 20th. And so, Jen, are you clear on what?
We're going to change the, I'm gonna have to get the exact, standards, but we're going to, in the middle school.
Which one are we on? I just wanna make sure which
Right
policy.
now, I'm
we're
looking at the
referring to.
middle school.
Alright.
I put the standards in there, so that's there.
Perfect, okay.
It's
And
in the
that's it.
comment, or I can put it right in, whatever is easier for you, but I did put it in the comments.
In the comments, okay.
I replied back to Rob's comments with it. And then under the philosophy, I did go in and suggested just
Okay.
changing that
Mhm.
first
Yeah.
sentence.
Yeah, 'cause that's just ridiculous. Like to write any policy like that is a journey.
Okay, so then the only other thing to change is about the,
I think we have to update that top part with the purpose. Cause that's not, the ride stuff is not what we're working off of anymore.
Right,
So-
no, I put it, you have it in the comments, or I can, well,
I see it in the comments, but I'm saying I think that's one that
I would
we
feel
don't have a
more
debate about
comfortable
that.
with this one
Yeah.
if you gave me a,
I'll
Yeah, red
go
line.
right in
A
and just
red
do it
line
right now.
version.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
redline what you actually think. Leave Rob's comments and
Yeah.
Shavali's
No, I'm
comments,
just-
but then just
I'm
change whatever you think is changeable
moving
right
it
now.
right
ju-
over.
just redline it, and, yeah,
That's super helpful, Ken. Cause that way, like, we know exactly, but also, like, I think all of Rob's points and
Yeah,
Shavali's points
should stay there,
or
yeah,
should stay there,
yeah.
cause those are all really valid for the long-term conversation. Do we know, and I know no one's here from the middle school today, but, Ken, to your point, there's nothing about the retaking, there's nothing about the remediation at the middle school level, and that's one that I do not believe that our teachers are not doing. Like, I imagine that they are working with students on some of that, and so, is that something that we could check on?
I'll follow up on that, that was
Yeah.
actually part of some of the conversations we had
Yeah.
today at the conference we were at, regarding that.
Cause
But-
again, like, if they are doing it
Yep.
pretty consistently, like, and it's not like a
And
big
it's the-
fundamental
and it's the
change for
test-
them.
It's the test retaking, you know what I mean, of when
Yeah.
you can retake a test, and that's what is happening.
That is
at
in
middle
the middle school policy though. 'Cause
There's
in the middle
something
school
that's not,
policy,
though.
under summative assessments, it says revision of summative assessments, not including final exams that are incomplete or score below 50% is mandatory and will follow the procedure, so it
There's
lists the procedures.
there's something, I'm trying to remember back to like literally February, but I think just looking at those, the high school one and the middle school one,
Yeah,
and just making sure that it reflects at least what they're doing at the middle schools is important.
Yep.
Before September, like, I think that's one that, like, we should go into the school year being really clear about, especially if what they're doing is different than what's in the policy.
When you say what do you mean,
I can't-
what, do you
yeah, I'm
mean
trying
when
to
it comes
remember
down
the
to like retaking assessments? Is that what you mean?
It was the part about, I'll have to go back and find the other parents' email about that. Let me see. I'll see if I can find it.
You might be
for you.
referring to this, Erin, if I,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, but there's one part of those procedures I just mentioned there, it says after 1 week, the student has failed to make up the work, the teacher will notify a parent and will assign the student to a before or after school tutorial program until the work is completed to 70% proficiency or until the end of the quarter, whichever comes first.
Yeah, and that
Is
might,
that what you're
and
kinda getting at?
that it might be, and it's not happening like that.
Right.
It was something like that.
That's-
I
that's
I'll
what's
go back
in
and find
the
the email too.
middle
It's a
school.
middle school
That's a
policy,
middle
but it's
school.
Yeah.
not in
Yeah.
the high school.
It's not in the high
Yeah.
school, correct.
But I also don't think, if I remember correctly, that's how the world is
Yep.
functioning right now.
Mhm.
And that's okay, like I defer obviously to the educators, but we need to, I feel like the parent that was, and it was a different parent than the parent Jen is referencing, was concerned about
Yeah.
that, so I'll find,
Well, we have to be clear with everybody,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, about what can be expected. And we also have to make sure that we involve, obviously, you know, different people in the process, so.
but also like, if it says it,
Mm-hmm.
then
We
we
have to
should be
do it.
doing it,
Yep,
and if
absolutely.
we're not
Yep.
doing it, that's totally fine,
Mhm.
but then we need to change it. Like,
Correct.
it doesn't matter which one, but like, it's gotta be, cause if somebody says, hey, like, my kid didn't get to do X, Y, Z, and they should have been able to, and that affected them, like, we don't wanna do that. So that's one that I definitely would like us to be really clear on before September.
Yep. I will,
Awesome. And again, it doesn't, to me personally, it doesn't matter either way, like, whatever, it's just whatever the current practice is, I would definitely defer, cause it's such an old policy, I wouldn't
Right.
assume that it's the correct thing to be doing for students at this point.
So for the 8:20 meeting, we're gonna have from Ken a marked up policy that will reflect the current standards, the language around remediation, and any other changes to go into effect for September, with the plan for addressing larger changes at a later date.
In the upcoming school year. The other thing I would just note, to Shivali's point, is if there's any other inconsistencies between the high school's handbook and these policies, like those to me have to be, so if you don't mind, Shivali, just making sure that there's no other inconsistencies.
Really, we normally just always take the policy and
Okay.
work out,
Yep.
that was the only one.
That was the only one?
That we
Okay.
added, and we were like, we can't wait for the policy change, we gotta just add
Got it.
Okay.
But anything else that we think we wanna see are in some of those Rob's comments.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to move this forward to the school committee with these changes.
Yeah, pending the changes.
Yep,
Yeah, I'll second
second, okay, all in favor?
Alright.
Okay, and then Ken, the meeting's not till the 20th, so Jules will start
Yeah, we'll-
harassing me a couple
we'll
days
get that.
before, okay.
Yeah, we'll work on it.
Alright, next up is the physical restraint procedures. So, Andrew, I had a question on this. Rachel had gone through and made some comments, but the existing policy, before any changes, is pulled directly from the regulations. So my question is, she's suggesting some changes to the existing policy, which would change the language from the regulations.
Correct. And the bulk of it is that, I'm trying to pull it up right now, it had to do with the seclusion, or the restraint versus, I'm just trying to find it here. I called her, she called me back, I didn't have a chance to connect with her, so I didn't really get her complete thought process on that, but I know she did make some substantial changes, but a lot of it was the language piece.
And also, a lot of.
Jen, to clarify, is your question like that she's making some changes that you think are against the regulation,
Well,
or
yeah, the
basically?
language we had was right from the
It
regulation.
was literally word for word from the
Yeah,
regulations.
so-
And I'm just questioning if we can have language.
I would assume we could have,
Additions but not subtractions.
Yeah, I'd rather leave the language from the regulation if there needs to be, because I do actually think one of her clarifications was pretty, there it is, was pretty interesting as far as the, try to pull it up now.
like, one of the comments, and I think this is a it is what it is kind of situation, is it says the training shall be approved by the Commissioner of Elementary and Secondary Education and shall include the following. Like, she wrote, like, I don't believe the Commissioner approved these things, but like, that's not
Yeah,
our vibe, that's
correct,
their vibe.
correct.
Like, we
That's-
send it to them and like, you know what I mean, like, that's,
Yep, it's crisis
matter.
intervention, that's the one
Yeah.
the physical restraint and
I
crisis
was gonna say, can
intervention
we
comes from
go
the,
in order?
yeah, I was
Okay.
answering Jen's question on the, that's where, but that language is right from the regulations.
Right, and and I get what she's saying, cause in the beginning of it, under our philosophy, she's saying, we want the staff to intervene in crises and use interventions, this is the de-escalation component. like, and so throughout the policy, the regulation refers to it as physical restraint / crisis intervention, so I understand where she's coming from, but I don't think that we can remove that as it's word for word from the regulation.
Yeah,
So-
I agree with that, and I actually understand exactly what she's saying, and it makes perfect sense,
Right.
but I'd be hesitant to start to change the language that's pulled right from the regulation.
So I'm wondering in our philosophy, which is not taken from the regulations, because that's our words in the
Yeah.
philosophy when this was written, it says, every North Kingstown student shall be free from the unreasonable use of physical restraint and crisis intervention. If we pull crisis intervention from that sentence, because they should be free from the unreasonable use of physical restraint, but then if we can put something in there about crisis intervention being a
Well, it
use of
kinda-
de-escalation.
It kinda says that in the next sentence. So if you took it out in the first sentence and then went to should only be used for crisis intervention for the purpose of preventing harm or injury, and like she gave better language, I think, in her description. Like on the second comment on the document.
Yep.
Like I think you could remove crisis intervention in the first sentence.
Yeah.
And then in that second sentence, use the language that Rachel provided about physical restraint, like should only be used if student is in immediate risk of hurting themselves or others, like that piece of it.
Yeah.
Kind of where that other language is, it might.
Yeah, but then I still think we need to say something about crisis intervention being something positive, because it's actually an act of de-escalation versus, because where she's coming from
Yeah.
is like physical restraint is a negative, for lack of a better term, and
Crisis
intervention
intervention is a
a
positive.
positive,
Yep.
right? And so that's where I feel like she's trying to go with this, and that's why she's trying to separate it. But in our philosophy, it's not coming out that way.
What do you think, Ken?
No, I agree with her point, and it does need to be separated, and I would take the crisis intervention out of that first sentence. And then I think we need to wordsmith where and how we put that in there, that crisis intervention is used as a, intervention, with students. I'm trying to think of like the whole
What's
wording,
our-
probably, you know what I mean, like there needs to be
What's our
another sentence
definition of
in there
crisis
for that.
intervention? Do we have one?
I'm seeing if there's one in the regs right now.
Cause when I just Googled it, it's not how we're saying it. But that's okay if like the reg has a definition
I
for
bet
it.
she doesn't, let me see.
Like it
It
talks
does
about
not.
crisis intervention
Yep.
involved, and this is a quick Google, so, but just to give us some context.
Yeah, no, I'm right in the regulation, it is not defined crisis, at
Yeah.
least the definition section doesn't define.
Cause this definition is crisis intervention involves providing immediate support and assistance to individuals who are experiencing a crisis or overwhelming emotional distress. The goal is to stabilize the situation, address immediate need, and help the person regain a sense of control and safety. And then it like gave examples of
If we
crisis
go
intervention.
back to safety care training, and you wouldn't use the term safety care in a policy, because the type of training or the program we're using could always change. But in safety care, the way, wording I would use is that we want staff, right, we limit physical restraint, but we encourage our staff to provide skills and competencies necessary to effectively prevent, minimize, and manage behavioral challenges with dignity, safety, and the possibility of a change.
And
To
actually,
me, that's a very positive term of what we're doing, and that comes right out of the training
Mhm.
we're using, that we're giving to our staff, but we're not naming the training, because that training could always change.
Yeah.
But we're referring back to what
Right.
it is that we're doing of
They-
effectively
they're basically
preventing,
defining crisis
minimizing,
as
and
physical
managing
restraint.
behavioral challenges
That's
with
what the
dignity,
regs.
safety, and the possibility of change.
So, we're looking at it right now, and this is the problem. The RIDE regulations define physical restraint
Yeah.
/ crisis intervention as a manual restraint, seclusion restraint, or a chemical restraint. So they're actually, and I don't think
They
correctly
inter-
so,
they
they've,
intertwine
exactly
them.
right, they're calling the
And-
crisis
and
intervention
crisis-
a
But
But
physical
this is
restraint.
one,
Different.
to me, physical restraint is one, maybe of 100
Yep.
crisis interventions.
Correct.
And I get why they're regulating the physical restraint piece of it, but like they're not
Well,
Yeah,
and
those are
physical
not
restraint's your
yeah.
last resort, right?
Mhm.
So when you're being trained in this, and you know, you're always taught, physical restraint is the last resort you're going to do if the individual is causing self-harm to themselves or others.
Mhm.
Prior to that, you're doing all of the steps of de-escalation, and you're using the strategies that you're being taught through which we now use safety care training. And those are all those positive interventions that you want to use, so you're de-escalating that behavior prior to where the individual is becoming irrational and you can't, and then physical restraint's the last resort. So the physical restraint should be kept separate in our
Mhm.
philosophy. I know we can't change the regs, but that should be kept separate, and then we should use wording that supports that positive interaction and interventions that we're using.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Get a
So
type,
I
get a typing, Ken.
Right.
Yeah, like I think what you're saying completely makes sense, but what we have written here is not that. So we should definitely edit that philosophy piece, because I think that makes sense. Because then I think, Jen, the purpose, this is one where the philosophy and the purpose are really
I don't wanna change the
intentional.
philosophy right now, it's highlighted in red, I don't wanna go in there and
No,
change
go
it.
ahead,
changed
I
it so
just
you
changed
could edit
it to include like what Rachel had talked about for physical restraint.
So Jen, make it black again, so Ken knows what was,
Yeah, I mean, I don't wanna go in and.
make, what was existing, was it, or was it always new?
No, but I deleted it without thinking about it, so I
Hit
just made
undo.
the whole paragraph
Just hit
red.
undo.
But then I'm
Hold on.
gonna lose what I typed in.
What'd you type in, the physical restraint part?
No, hold on,
It's Google, we have history.
I
We can
know,
figure this
hang
out.
on.
Cause I think the purpose of this is one thing, but then the philosophy is different. Like, the purpose is to, like, regulate basically physical restraints used in the district, but the philosophy is a little different, right? Why didn't you just make the face?
No, because the more, I mean, I'm loath to change the language from the actual regulation, but the more we're talking about it, and when I look at that definition, I know exactly what she's saying, and I just don't think it's accurate.
No.
From a regulatory standpoint, it's not accurate.
No.
But I wonder if we just continued to consistently use the physical restraint and carved out crisis intervention, we're still within the spirit of the regulation,
Yeah.
which is to prevent the actual, physical restraint, or not prevent it, but to legislate it, if you will.
Andrew, while Jen's doing that, is the thing that Rachel mentions in the next comment the same thing as the regulation, or is it different? The one about McKinley Flat Act.
I mean, I personally would leave that in there. I'll double check to see if that's right out of the,
She's saying it's redundant.
Yeah.
I don't think it's redundant
I don't either.
to say it in the policy,
Nope.
but
let me just double check that, I mean, this was almost mirrored the regs last time, when we went through it, but.
Ken, that should be all set.
Okay, thank you.
So I added this sentence about, that our under our policy statement saying it's consistent with the code of regulations, so that hopefully it shows that all the language underneath that, or should I say like as stated in the code, like right under policy statement, see it in yellow, Andrew?
Yeah, it shouldn't, we should reference it, like kinda how we do with the other ones. Like I wonder if we do something about like that, basically like whatever we're doing has to be consistent with the code, cause the code could get updated, right? At some point, if somebody wanted to, they could amend or change it.
No, that sentence, Erin, is right from
Yep.
2.3 of the regulations.
The one that says consistent with code of, RI,
pub-
code of regulations?
No, the one that we were just talking about, shall
Oh,
develop
okay,
written
yeah.
procedures regarding the appropriate responses. That's right from the regs.
Yep. Alright, so that comment that Rachel made is,
yeah.
you have to just,
I would leave it.
yeah.
Sorry, Rich.
So how should we phrase the part about how like everything below policy statement is from the procedure?
What about like the, saying something about like this policy, how do we do it with the other ones?
You mean just, you talk about the highlighted
Yeah.
references? I mean, you could even just put a footnote after policy statement. Say that-
Except some of the stuff that's in there because of the mediation agreement is not
Slightly
like,
different, no, you're right, some of the reporting stuff
Yeah.
and some of the other, yep. Generally consistent with,
That doesn't sound right.
well, it is generally consistent with.
Consistent with and then some?
Yeah, consistent with and a little extra.
Where it's extra, I put under those sections additional NKSD requirements to kind of like note that those things were over and above the procedure.
Say, the below policy meets and in certain places exceeds
Okay,
the
Code regulations.
requirements of the Rhode Island Code of Regulation, RICR.
How do we note things that are mandated, from that agreement, like, so that future school committees know that it wasn't, that was, you know what I mean, that they, cause like when
Yep.
it's so hard to look at a document and know.
Maybe we put footnotes on those and said,
Yeah.
you know, pursue,
Okay.
this is included pursuant
Yeah,
to
like give some
the-
breadcrumbs,
Yep.
because I think that's
Yeah.
important for future people to know that we didn't just do that. Like that was a very intentional thing.
that's a great point. I can see somebody going through going, well, that's
Okay,
dumb.
we don't need that, that's not in the reg,
Take
that's not in the
that
reg.
Yeah, why was this in there?
Yeah.
Okay, so,
One question I had here, Jen, was under the procedures part, it says annually reviewed, and you know, like I didn't know if we wanted to give,
where are you?
under procedures, it says such procedures shall be annually reviewed and provided to school staff and made available to parents and guardians of enrolled students.
Why can't I find, where is procedures?
I'm on page 1 under bullet 1.
Page 1 under bullet 1, that is the procedure. So we can certainly do more, but that is the way.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying that we
Yeah.
shouldn't, I'm saying that annually reviewed, like that could literally be June 30th
Yeah.
of a school year, right? Like do we
Mhm.
want that to be done at the
So,
beginning of the school year?
Physical
like,
restraint, just, you know, in the past, it's supposed to be done at the beginning of the school year.
yeah,
So that's one of the policies that we update, so when we talk about training, so everyone gets a review of the policy, what those expectations are, the process, who are the trained safety care
Mhm.
individuals in your building. And then the extensive training of being trained in safety care also happens annually, but at a different time
Yeah.
throughout the year, depending on when your cert expires.
yeah, this
And
is
that-
about the,
So this is going back to the procedures, right? So such
yeah, this is about the
procedures-
procedure, so I feel like, I was saying that we might wanna note, like, I don't, not to say September, but like, something that doesn't just note annually, but like,
I would say such procedures shall be annually reviewed at the beginning of the year.
yeah, something like that,
What was that?
at the
Such
beginning of the year.
procedures shall be annually reviewed at the beginning of
Of
the
the
school year.
I'm just thinking like it does no, like in theory,
Yeah.
an
Could do it June
administration could
30th.
do it June 30th and be in compliance, and that's not what the
Right. It
intent
needs
of
to
that
be at the
sentence is.
beginning of the
The intent is so that they understand the process. And also I thought made available was fairly vague. Like sure, yeah, okay, it's made, what does that mean to me, right? Like I'm a new parent of a kindergartner, Like, you know what I mean? Like, made available just seemed a little bit of a. I felt like we could be stronger there.
Mhm.
But I also want to be reasonable to the administration about what that means, so I defer to you, Ken.
Yeah, cause I'm guessing made available means on the website of the, well, didn't we
Well,
change?
that's what I'm looking, we do,
But
so we
didn't
do have
we,
stuff
isn't
on
that
the
part of
website,
the
but
agreement that we were providing the,
I believe if
Is
a
it
student
supposed
went,
to be
I'll
part
look
of-
down and check, but I believe if they went into DA that we agreed for the mediation agreement, that we'd also provide them at that point in time with,
and they do, I know at all the
Yep.
meetings, everything that's being
Exactly.
provided to them, and I will also say that our special administrative staff have certain brochures and laws linked to their email, so every
Mhm.
time the email is sent, it's there.
I think this is for all parents,
So that way,
though,
every
not
time something goes out,
just-
you have access to it.
Mm-hmm. Those are all
And
practices though, not the policy. So I like, those are all good things, but like, do we wanna put something specifically in here about how
How it,
it's available? Cause like available could mean it's in
Mhm.
the executive administrator's drawer, and if somebody asks for it, they can have it. Like, that's not the intent of that sentence, so I think we should be more clear.
Didn't we talk about either
I
adding
believe
this
the
as a
student handbook,
checkbox?
also somewhere in the student handbook that,
Didn't we talk about adding this as a, like, checkbox on the Aspen sign stuff at the beginning of the school year? Or didn't that launch into a discussion about a, like, important, email about, instead of like the Aspen, I feel like we started there and then we ended up with a, like
Was that
resources
this or
you
was that
should know
something
about
else?
email. Does anybody remember that?
Yes, cause I remember specifically saying I've never seen that in my life.
Yes.
Let's go to the schools.
That's right.
And then I went home and I asked Chris, did you get something that I
Right,
missed?
right.
And the answer was no, which made me feel better as a human, but,
Yeah, we had talked about
yeah.
sending
It
out
was that,
a,
was that this though, or was that something
I
else?
think it was this.
Okay. Whatever, I mean, whatever we think is the correct thing, but I do just think that sentence for the policy part needs to be communicated to, like, either, or available online, or, you know, like it,
I would say
email
that
to-
it's available on our website, and
Yeah.
I would also put something in our student handbook where there's a link to it.
yeah. I think that that's reasonable, and I think, you know, like, if it's on the website, you can look it up, right? Like, I wanna know about this,
Mhm.
okay, that's available, but I think just spelling that out is important. Cause where is it now?
It's on the website under policies.
No, the written procedure, it's the.
This
it's-
is the written procedure. Yeah.
Is there an F or a?
Well, that's the, we had talked, this is the one and then the
Yeah.
regulation, quote unquote, is the other. And what we wanted to do was pull in
Yeah.
those, and I didn't see any of those comments in here.
Yep.
But let's finish this.
Yep.
So, are we going to take out the word crisis intervention, Andrew? Did we land on that?
Kind of talked myself into it, to be honest with you. I think what she says makes eminent sense. And I think is the purpose of the regulations is for the physical restraint. The fact that they define the two the same, I don't think we have to, as long as we're dealing with the physical restraint part. So I think we can't,
Okay.
I think her point's well taken.
And then under this section on advanced staff training, I added, from the agreement, additional NKSD requirements, the district will continue its ongoing training as required by law and shall update RIDE periodically as training takes place, and that's the language directly from the agreement. You want me to put a footnote there?
I actually added per the RIDE, unless I missed that particular, I was trying to go through and add per the RIDE mediation agreement to each.
Okay, will you add it
Oh,
there?
right there, yep.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So now under use of physical restraint, 3, so the regulation reads non-physical event, when you can use it, non-physical interventions would not be effective. Rachel had noted to change to escalation and intervention strategies.
Where are you?
But that's really changing the
What page are you on?
Number 3, page.
Number 3 on page 3?
Yep.
Yep.
So it says in physical restraint, crisis intervention may only be used in the following circumstances.
Maybe you could do non-physical intervention, and again, I'm a little over my skis here, non-physical interventions such as escalation and intervention strategies?
Can you just point out where I'm sorry? I was
No, no worries, it's,
Page 3.
Item 3 on page 3.
Thank you.
I don't think we can change, like, she's not wrong, but like, even taking out the word crisis intervention in some of these is probably too, we probably honestly shouldn't do it across the board.
Well, and that's, that was my question, just looking at this, why are we crossing out crisis intervention?
It was based on Rachel's recommendation, which Andrew has convinced himself into, but like, it's.
Well,
But
because
I guess, my only thought on that is when you go back to the
Yeah, we
training
can't
and
agree.
the training that we have to provide, crisis intervention, which is all the de-escalation strategies, are part of that training, so why would we take it out? And with some of this language being part of the
regulations.
regulations,
Yeah, you
I
can't.
wouldn't take it out, but we can also explain and define it
Yeah,
better,
I think
right?
the
Do
way
we wanna define it, like,
So
explicitly?
under A, where it says non-physical interventions would not be effective, it says use of, so 3 is use of physical restraint / crisis intervention.
Physical restraint may be used only in the following circumstances, when non-physical interventions would not be effective.
And she's saying change it to escalation and intervention strategies, we can define that, non-physical interventions such as.
That's what it says,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right,
Yep.
and
I
then just
think-
put that in there.
I think we may wanna do that.
Sorry, I was
Yeah, that's
reading
fine.
something
Yeah,
else.
no,
I was saying that
not at all.
To a-
would be a little.
So non-physical interventions, parentheses. So, but I think what I was hearing you say too, and I don't know how far we can go with this, Andrew, but like have been exhausted, right? Like we have tried X, Y, and Z, and like it is not working, and like this child is a
last-
harm to
last
themselves or
It's
resort.
someone
a health and,
else.
it's a
Yeah.
health and
Yes,
safety
yeah.
risk, that's
Yeah,
what
like
it
we
should
didn't
always
start
come
with
back to.
this.
Right.
We had tried to implement some of our other
Right,
crisis
so-
intervention
Well,
techniques,
that-
and here we are.
Right,
But like,
verbal redirection.
That's
Yeah.
number
all,
C,
you know,
if a
yeah.
behavioral
Yeah.
intervention plan has been developed for the student, those various positive reinforcement techniques have been implemented appropriately and the child has failed to respond to those reinforcement
but that's only if a
techniques.
behavioral intervention plan has been developed.
Sure.
Yeah, it's actually interesting, 'cause
Yeah.
if you read A just as it's written, and I mean, again, I would obviously defer to the person involved, but that would almost indicate that you've just made a spot decision that non-physical
only choice.
interventions will not,
Which
right.
might be possible, I mean,
Again.
we're not, if somebody's coming at you with a weapon,
Right.
yeah, we're not gonna be like, okay, so-and-so, like, let's take a deep breath and count to five, no, you have to protect yourself for them, right, and so.
There are times, and I'm just gonna speak as
Yeah.
being a special educator and as a past trainer in
Yeah.
CPI, there are times when
Yeah.
a student is past that point of the de-escalation because you're sitting and they might be coming at you
Yeah.
with a fist or a hand,
Yeah.
and you do need to block, you do need to use that type of intervention because they are may hurt someone or something or themselves. You then go back to try and de-escalate them, but this is the language from the regs, we can't,
Mhm.
I'm not, to me, when there's regulations or we're putting policy, we should be saying we're following the regulations. We can add a little bit to that to describe it, but that's the regulation, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And when you're being trained and you're a trainer providing this, you know, you start off with everything around de-escalation, but there are times when an
It's just
individual
not-
is
it's not
asked
bad,
that.
yeah.
And along those
Do
lines,
to-
what we could do is we could, if we wanted to keep the language from the regulations, you could just define crisis intervention at some point initially. You know, the crisis intervention for purposes of this policy is defined as a physical restraint under the ride regs. Cause I do, like I said, I do understand what Rachel's saying, and it makes, I think you got it too, it makes perfect sense to me. Crisis
Yeah.
intervention could be any of this.
Mhm.
So it shouldn't be physical restraint, and physical restraint may be the last part of a crisis intervention, right? But there's all the other stuff ahead of time. It's just that ride kinda defines them all,
Is-
they glom them all
Yeah,
together.
that's what I'm asking,
Yeah.
does RIDE distinguish between those two terms? Or does
No.
RIDE kinda group them on
No,
as
they
the
literally have a
same?
slash.
I mean, all I can tell you is
Okay.
what, like, we pulled up the
Yeah.
definition there, and it defines the two, and then it says, here's the definition, then it goes on to just talk about different physical restraint / crisis intervention means, then it defines manual restraint, seclusion restraint, and chemical restraint.
Okay, so RIDE is sort of drawing a parallel between the drastic nature of both physical restraint and crisis intervention, the same.
Exactly.
Got it.
They're almost saying crisis intervention is a physical, I mean, that's,
Alright, so it's not necessarily what we're talking about. then.
Exactly.
Okay.
so that may lead to Dr. Duba's point, maybe we just define it or clarify somehow what our intention is,
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
can
It's kind of
maintain the-
misleading in a way, though.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
So back to that part on page 3, like, I think we leave it A. I don't think we should change it to what Dr. Santa suggested, just because of the reg and because of what Dr. Duva
Mhm.
kind of said, so.
And I can understand exactly where Rachel's coming from,
Yeah.
and she is a trainer, right? But I think we just need to, it needs to be part of that, right?
Mhm.
We can't remove the regulation,
Mhm.
but we can define what Rachel is stating.
And the difficulty we're also dealing with here is, I think, as all of us know, they're in the process of, well, they've been in the process of rewriting these regulations for a long time. I mean, this is a dated regulation, so a lot of this language probably isn't exactly what we'd like to see in today's day and age, but it's what we have right now.
Mhm. Okay. Do we wanna give examples of what are considered non-physical interventions? Do we wanna do that, or no? We don't wanna go on.
You could give it under the philosophy if you wanted to. I think if you wanted to like expound the philosophy and say like, you know, when we're talking about in NKSD, you know, XYZ, you know, like, you know, but, and then go into the physical restraint piece. So I would probably add it up at the top would be my recommendation. Or under procedures.
So if you look under the philosophy, I did add something in there, and where it says implement strategies, we can implement de-escalation, just putting the word in there.
De-escalation strategies and concepts necessary to effectively prevent, minimize, and manage behavioral challenges and dignity.
Andrew, up at the top too, I put,
Do we wanna just add the word non-physical, just for the sake of,
I
like,
put a sentence that
Align with
said,
later. non-physical de-escalation strategies?
Jen, I changed your sentence a little bit just to read
Oh.
better, the policy part. But
Maybe
then I
just
added one that says,
de-escalation.
items designated below, were agreed upon by the districts in accordance with RIDE mediation on, and then the date, so if you
Yeah.
put in the date there, and then like it'll reference it, but at least it like explains it.
I'm gonna change it to the ride mediation agreement dated, and then
Yeah.
I'll find out what exactly what it was, yep.
So like if anybody ever wanted to go backwards and find
Yep.
it, they could.
So, on one of these under, where is it? Under the prohibitions, there's a sentence that says, as in any intervention, they're talking about prone, restraints. Rachel has a note that says, we will not use prone restraints. Do we wanna add that in this bullet here, like something that says, note NKSD will not use prone restraints?
Or although included in the regulation, like NKSD, I don't know what that is, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, this seems to say, right, that you can't use a prone restraint unless it's by trained personnel in a limited emergency intervention. She's saying we don't use it, but I just don't have the knowledge base to,
Yeah.
Again, this is language right out of the regs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yep, I would rather keep the language from the reg, and if it's internally, we don't, I'm, like I said, I don't know what they are or why we wouldn't use
Prone
them.
contaminant, is it brief, physical?
prone extreme middle, floor down, that's not,
It's when you're on the
That's not
floor.
yeah.
Huh? It's when you're on the
Yeah,
floor.
it's not recommended, 'cause it's not safe.
Yeah.
So, and I can see where she's coming from, we don't, we're telling you, you don't do that. But again, I think we also just need to follow what that regulation states.
Do we
And
wanna
that
put
is
that
part of
somewhere in
practice.
our policy that we will not use them?
Just
The only thing,
say,
and
where would we?
far be it from me, cause I mean, this is very specific, this language that's from the reg, it can only be done by a trained person if documented as as part of a previously agreed upon written behavior intervention plan. Now, I don't have the knowledge base to know why you would even have it, but, I mean, that's really narrow as it stands. I mean, if we don't do it, then I would assume we wouldn't have a behavior plan that would authorize
She's just stating in here
it.
in
Yeah,
the
she's saying
comments
that she
we
would not be
don't.
putting
I mean,
those into students'
she's not
plans.
saying we need to put
Yeah.
it in there, it's just her comment, we will not use it.
Yeah, so I'm
and that's
thinking
part
if
of
we're
the
not gonna do
training,
behavior
not-
plans that
So-
that would allow for it, then it's a
Right.
non-issue.
And
Okay.
again, you have to be specifically trained, documented, and
So I and J in this section are not in the regulation as of today. I don't know, like, when the last time the regulation was updated. My guess is when this policy was put together, it was in the regulation, but it's not in there now, so I'm gonna.
We have the ability to remove it if we would like to,
Exactly.
but we don't have to.
Correct.
So that, I would defer to Ken and, Rob on that one.
So those aren't in there now.
No.
Correct.
Where'd they come from?
They were, they're
Probably
in the
in the
current policy.
regulation when the policy was drafted.
Got it.
And
Are
didn't
they
get
still in the
updated.
regulations?
No, they're not in the,
They are
they're
not in the, I went through line by line with the regulation and the policy.
You're right, no, I'm
This is
looking at it
like
right
giving
now.
a
It
drug
seems
to
really,
sedate.
really,
Seems like a
really
weird thing to
outside of the
take-
bounds.
Yeah, that you would take
Like-
that off,
Like,
yep.
for sure. So I can't see, I mean, Ken, I'll defer to you a little bit on this
I
one.
would take it out. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not in the regulation,
Is
you can
there
question
any
why are you
world
putting it in there.
where
I
we
would
would
hope not.
sedate a child?
Yeah, I would hope not.
Because that's what that
What do you
means,
mean?
right?
That's why I'm trying to figure out why it would
Yeah.
come out in the
I was
first
there.
place. I think I agree with Rob on that one, it seems
Yeah.
like an odd thing to take out.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get rid of that.
Okay, gone, okay. So Andrew, I see you added additional, let me just, I'll change it right here, additional, do this, and then up here.
One question that I had about item 6 on page 5, I
Item 6.
don't know if you can see where I highlighted it. It's under reporting requirements. It says the staff member who administered the physical restraint / intervention shall inform the North Kingstown School Administration, North Kingstown School Administration, like, I didn't know if that meant their building principal, like, does that count, or is it central admin, like, what are we talking
I
about?
would make that a little more specific, and that's a little loose, I would say that it goes back to the building administrator, because if you're gonna be doing a restraint in the school, then it's reported back to the building
Yeah,
administrator.
yeah.
All building administrators have been or will be trained by the end of this month.
So we're gonna change it to
So-
building administrator?
So staff member,
And there's a form that has to be completed.
yeah, but it talks about the written report, but it just seemed very like,
Could be anybody.
it could be a lot of different administrators
so
being,
and so.
yeah,
But it
so
should
if
be
you
the
want,
building-
if
it
you
should be
think
the
it should
building
go to the
administrator.
principal, the building administrator, the principal, whoever, that is much more clear, I think, because, but then, is there anything from a higher level, Ken, And maybe it talks about it later, Jen.
The form is completed and that is then shared with Rachel, so.
So do we wanna note where the written report needs to be sent? Cause it just says a written report needs to be done, but it doesn't say the school department administration will maintain the ongoing
I'm
written record.
gonna go in and
Alright,
read it.
yeah, I just felt like it was a little loose.
Mhm.
Like you fill out a form and where does it go after that?
It says that we will maintain the ongoing record, but it doesn't say how long we maintain that ongoing record either.
So speaking of forms, there was a form that was referenced in the mediation agreement.
Yep.
Where is it? What is it?
Rachel spent a lot of time on that. I will have her get, cause I actually went back and looked at that, but I just have a PDF, which was not a complete. That was sort of a work in progress, but she ended up with a really comprehensive Google form that she put together.
And
So
is it different from this form that we were just talking about? Does it replace that form?
it was definitely completely revamped as a part of the mediation agreement.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very comprehensive
So it's
now.
the same form, like the one we were
It
just talking about?
replaces
Yeah.
instead of in
Yes,
addition
yep,
to.
Okay.
yep, but it basically, now it mirrors the regulations as to exactly what's gotta be in it. And, I'll ask her to send that out, cause she's got it in the Google form.
Do we wanna include a copy of that with this policy?
Yes,
Yes.
as an appendix.
Okay. So the other piece in the mediation agreement says that the district shall amend any relevant policies to reflect the items
We just
above,
did.
which we've done, and to describe its own
And undo.
procedures for
Skip.
receiving and investigating complaints regarding
Disagreed.
restraint practices. So there are no procedures in this policy for receiving and investigating complaints. I went to the other policy and it says in there, procedures for investigating complaints. The submitting, receiving, investigating, and resolving complaints regarding restraint practices shall be processed through the North Kingstown School Committee Policy BH, School Committee Communication, Chain of Command, as adopted by the school committee, which to me doesn't feel like a good one.
Can I
Does
take
that-
a
no,
crack
does
at that?
that mean-
I would think like a one paragraph, just and I'll leave some blanks, but obviously, so the understanding is I've got a complaint regarding a restraint done to my child.
Yeah.
I need to be able to know who I'm gonna submit that complaint to, and like all our other policies, there should be the complaint will be received, interviews will be done, you'll be provided with a written report, I think that's the verbiage
But-
we're looking for.
Yeah,
I think what our current verbiage is saying is that it should go through the normal processes so that you would first, like if you had an issue with something that a teacher did in your building, the first person that you would then complain to is the building principal. If that's not resolved, then it would go to like the superintendent level. If that's not resolved, then it would come to the school committee. So I think that's what they're trying to say, is that it follows that same pattern, but.
Yeah, I think I'd like to, especially since Ryan will
Yeah,
take a
be
look
more
at this, I'd like to
specific.
spell it out a little
Yeah.
bit better, because I actually think it's a complaint, but there should be some sort of an investigation, even if it's done at the building level, that's absolutely fine, you know what I mean, but so, this is what happens,
Outlining
someone's
that a
gotta
little
look
bit
into it,
more.
make sure all the steps were followed, and then that can be appealed all the way up if you
And
wanna
they can
start
get,
at the
and then
building
that
level.
building administrator would give a written report of saying, hey, I looked into this,
Yeah.
all, even though you might be displeased with how whatever it was followed, the behavior plan was followed, whatever was followed. And then if they're displeased with that report, then they would follow that process.
Or, and again, I would defer to Rachel and Ken and Rob on that might be something that they'd prefer, maybe, if it's a
Central
appeal, yeah, exactly, maybe that goes right to Rachel's office, if it's an appeal, so but I think that we should have, this is where it goes, and even if it's just a couple of sentences, this is what the process looks like, and then you can go up the chain. I think that's more in line with what they had, but I would defer, obviously, to you all,
Mhm.
whether that would be handled at the building level, or maybe something like that kicked right up to, to Rachel's level.
Is it, from a parent's perspective, 2 school days seems a little bit far away for being informed about something happening? I don't know if I'd be like thrilled to find out something two school days later. Like especially if something happened on a Friday, that means I don't find out until a Tuesday.
Give me one
I'm
minute
on
just
page
to-
5.
Give me 1 minute, just go there, I'm just
Trying
looking
to
up
find it
something else.
No worries, page 5 on B.
Oh,
I was
that's
going
just-
in order again per your request.
Oh, no, you're right,
I know, I'm
I'm
just
just looking
kidding,
at
I'm
some
just
about
kidding.
record retention, because
Aaron, I
that's
agree
been
with
that
it.
long.
I think it should be one day.
It's right
Yeah,
from,
it's
that's right
one
from the
day.
regulations.
Like I need to know the next day.
Yeah,
That's
I
right
agree
from the
with that.
regulations.
And then I also don't know if I don't know how to write this, but like if it happens on a Friday, like every attempt should be made to, like, you know, like the goal would, or maybe as soon as possible, but no later than, or something. I just feel like that's something that we should not be
Within
just,
24 hours?
So that's right
I don't
from,
know.
I
right
don't
from
wanna
the
overdo it,
regulations.
but I just feel like 2 days seemed like, two
Yeah.
school days seemed like a long amount of time for that notification.
We wouldn't even wait a day.
No, like,
I would say if it's gonna be, I mean, when we're talking
Yeah.
about physical restraints, something like this, it should be that day.
It should be that day.
yeah,
family.
so
Yeah.
You don't wait even
Right.
past
2
24
school
hours.
days just seems
No
like.
way.
Because
Yeah.
in that case too, if physical restraint, they should be getting checked by the nurse, the documentation's being written, the
Yeah.
child's going home. You don't send the child home
I
without
mean,
notifying the
Yeah,
family.
So-
exactly.
I'm wondering, well, this is what I'm wondering, if, a written report will be completed and shared, that's no later than.
That's not
the
that part
Yeah,
though.
where I lost you here, that's, hang on a
This
second.
is just under, the written report's a different thing, that's A.
Yeah.
Right?
We're talking
But then
about,
I'm on B now, and that's informing parents and guardians. It says North Kingstown School Department Administration shall have procedures to inform the
Yep.
students' parents or guardians. Who is doing that?
It's me, I'm sorry, I was editing A.
I'm jumping between the pages.
I was trying to
doing what I
it's
said I was
like
doing.
moving everywhere.
That
Okay, I got it. No
paragraph.
worries, no worries. Of use of restraint as soon as possible, but no later than 2 days after that. But that as soon as possible wasn't there when I started talking about this, was it?
Yeah.
I think so, because that's right from the regulations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right from the
But no
regs,
later than 2 days
which does seem long.
after each incident. Yeah, like I just
I was
feel
thinking of
like
the written report, that I could see if you had a
Yeah,
crisis
that's different.
situation, it might take a couple of days to get the report up to speed, but you think you notify the parents
I
right away.
personally
I mean,
think
we
that
can
our
add
expect-
something
our-
that
yeah.
says that we will do it sooner. We can improve the regulation, we
Yeah.
just can't.
Yeah, I think we
Can't go
should
5
be,
days.
I think, one, our administrators are already doing this, but two, I think like setting that standard of, I don't want,
Just
To
so
find out.
everybody knows, when we have a situation like that, somebody's assigned to call the parent while it's going on.
yeah,
We always call them.
Ken, what are
Yes.
you
To see
doing?
if
You're
they wanna
adding
come
stuff
in
in
to
back
help.
in the
I
regulation.
know, I'm going back, I'm changing it. I'm gonna put it in
See, I
red.
learned this at the last meeting, I'm trying not to change anything.
you're like, I will get you.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm gonna add a little thing that says additional NKSD requirements. I'm not gonna put per ride mediation, cause it's not, and I'm gonna say the district,
No, so.
makes every attempt to notify the students, parent slash guardian of the use of a restraint. The day of
The incident or the
the same
occurrence?
day it occurs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Bless you.
Bless you. Is there that additional NK required per ride? Oh, that's like in 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah, those are the additional.
So, this is just this is not an important edit. Wouldn't it be like informing parents or guardians 1, and then it would say like additional NK requirement,
This
and
is
then.
not formatted, this is just
Okay, you'll
like
you'll
throwing
fix it?
everything
Okay.
in here to look at.
I'm just saying, like, it's not really, like, it's not 1, 2, 3, it would be
Yeah.
like, you'd order it in the
Yes.
same way, even though it's
Yes.
not reg and reg, okay. Perfect. You're like, that's one of those things that you are going to not talk to me about today, 'cause
Yes.
I don't feel it.
We've got form and we've got pretty.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure that we
Functionality, yeah.
were, that makes sense. But I just wanted to make it clear to folks, so that's good.
So under the regulations though is a whole bunch of more stuff. And I don't know what of that should be incorporated into this.
This is where we get, where is it?
Where we
Well,
go?
this is
Follow
under
college.
JICD R2.
Oh, this is the procedure stuff.
Yeah,
Hold on,
Because
I'm not
we-
done here.
you're not done with that one.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I just had a question about the report to the Department of Education. It says the North Kingstown School Department shall provide the Rhode Island Department of Education a record of every incident of the use of physical restraint / crisis intervention on an annual basis. In the reg that's all it says, like it doesn't say when or
that's all it
what's
says.
included,
No.
like that's it. Okay.
Where did you see that, just so I can,
It's down at the bottom on page 7 at the top. So on page 7 on the top, up here.
yeah, so that's a RIDE report that we do once a year,
Yep.
we just have to submit it, so it's part of the.
Yeah, I
all
just wanna
those
make sure that
reports,
that
right, so-
language was consistent with what they were doing right now.
Oh, the other thing just to note was the 7 under emergency situations where it says this policy should not create a barrier to maintaining a safe school environment, blah, blah. That is in the regulations, but was not in the policy beforehand, and I didn't know why, but I put it in because it seemed like it was a pertinent part of the
Yeah.
regulation.
Okay, now you want us to look at the other one?
Yeah, this is gonna be one that, administration's gonna have to go through
Yeah.
and decide what needs to be pulled in.
What section are we on now? I'm
Is
sorry.
there
I have
a-
a-
The regular-
sorry, I have a question to go back to with
Just
the physical
trying to
restraint.
find if there's a
Sure.
regulation we're
JIC.
looking at too.
So on page 7, under the additional NKSD requirements per RIDE mediation agreement number 4. Well, no, it's 3. Where it says the district shall provide the parent, guardian of any child placed at Davisville Academy with the RIDE brochure. We are transitioning some of those
Yeah, so we
clinical day
should,
programs out of DA. I think we need to think of how we're wording that, because we
Yeah.
now have one of our elementary programs at Fishing Cove.
yeah, I think we
And
should
it's the same
say,
type of program, so I'm wondering if we,
make it not building specific but program specific.
Right.
Yeah, I would be fine with that as long as
and my
Andrew
only
thinks it
concern
needs
then
to-
about putting the name of a program, names of programs change. So we can call it clinical day program, and then
Mhm.
next
Yeah.
year, we don't call it clinical day anymore, so that we gotta be careful of the
Mhm.
wording and how we put that in there.
I think that's
Um,
one though that you just have to put in, and then if it completely changes, I think putting in clinical day program is better than putting in like whatever
Mhm.
name it is this year, like, some of the different programs we have different names. Like, I think if you just put it as a general, it'll be fine, and then if it really changes,
And
then
then a
they'll have
child
to go back and
placed
update the policy.
within the school district's clinical day
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
There you go.
program.
NKSD, like,
Mhm.
clinical day programs.
And is that?
That's the intent, like, the
Yeah.
intent is, it's not the building specific, so Ken's actually trying to expand what
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
mediation is, not restricted.
Right.
Cause like technically we get off on a technicality and just give it to people that are physically at Davisville Academy, and that's not the
Mhm.
intent, I don't think.
Do we leave it, since the mediation agreement says Davisville Academy, do we say Davisville Academy or any other of the district's clinical day programs?
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be preferable.
Or do we just say, or or any other district special education program?
How far does that go though? Like,
Well,
does that
We have
include-
students within other programs that at times their behavior requires these types of.
Yep. I mean, I'm on team give it
Interventions.
to all students, like, I don't see
And I
why we
believe
wouldn't
that
provide
what's
information, like,
happening
I'm
at
on
brochure
team every,
is, and that's why it's also
family could get this.
attached to Rachel's email, and Julie's kind of, it's there, so that way
yeah.
it's
What
available and.
if that's a sticking point, I can actually run that by council for, I mean, we were dealing with the Davisville Academy, which is why that's referenced in there, but if you guys wanna expand that, I'm relatively certain we wouldn't get any pushback, I can make a
No,
call.
Ken's actually going the opposite direction, so like, I think it's fine to keep the word Davisville Academy in, just because it still exists right now, like, as a function, and then I think Jen's recommendation of saying Davisville Academy or boom, 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 like, is fine. So we'll leave it in, we don't need to go back to this, because we're not taking it out, we're just going beyond that. I think it's fine, and then if
Right, so we're
DA
just
ever closed,
expanding
you
it
would just remove it.
more.
Again, though, is special education program, do we want, I'm not gonna find the right word for this, but like, are you talking every student that gets an IEP or 504? Cause that, you
Is-
know,
The way I wrote it would be any student with an IEP. I mean, any other special education
Yeah.
program.
I would just have it part of that, and I believe it's part of all the paperwork that they're giving out now, they're making sure that the brochure is there,
Mm.
because it could be any child.
yeah,
And if we wanna cover our bases, that gets part of the paperwork we're handing out, that is, just like any procedural safeguards, here's information regarding. And again, it could be
should
explained to
we,
the
can we
parent
be more
that we're
clear
just-
about which ride brochure? Cause
Says
like,
bride brochure and restraints,
yeah, but like, which, like,
there's only.
Is the one, I think it's the one that's
Just
linked
one.
right above.
Yeah, so
no, I know which one we're giving out right now, but when they're looking at this in 10 years, like, you know, like, it's like,
I would say that in 10 years, hopefully this is.
Oh, we
you
linked to
know,
it though, right?
that- what was that?
Mhm.
We linked to it
We
in
do.
here.
Right,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right, and so stuff would have to be,
yeah, but we don't like, if you don't, I don't personally like linking to stuff, cause then if Ride changes their link, then it's bad.
It-
So I'm saying like,
We could, it's called Protection for Rhode Island Students Understanding the RI Physical Restraint Regulations, so,
this brochure is from 2013.
I know.
Again, they've been talking about revamping these for a long time.
Yeah, but like, you know what I mean? So I would say like the Protection for Rhode Island Students, Understanding RI Physical Restraint Regulations, author 2013. That's like the, or updated version. You know, like I'm just saying, like, you wanna, Ride brochure could be, like, I don't even know more.
right, but if we say the ride brochure on restraints, I'm just thinking we're kinda leaving it general, just like we don't say a specific program, so if ride then changes the
Yeah.
brochure, we don't have to really go in and change the policy so much, as long as we know we're referring to the
Yeah, you could say
brochure.
the most updated or the most current Ride,
As amended from
Yeah.
time to time, as you,
Yeah.
but again.
or just say the most, whatever the most up-to-date or the most current Ride RI Physical Restraint Regulations brochure is.
What are we gonna say?
A little bit better
I
than
think-
this,
yeah.
but like basically like whatever Ride's best brochure is.
I think we wanna say the most
Yeah.
current ride guidance on physical restraints, do we wanna just say that rather than brochure?
Current
This is,
RI.
but the regulation this literally talks about the actual
It-
brochure,
it-
like
Okay.
it's
that
not
needs
just,
to refer to the brochure at the end.
Yeah, and don't forget, this
Okay.
is
So
for the
I would just say
mediation
the- I
agreement
would
too,
just say
that's
the
what, I
current
mean,
ride
Most
most
current
brochure on
ride
physical
brochure on
restraint.
physical restraints. Okay.
And that if it changes, it changes, but we
Yeah.
don't have to worry about changing the
yeah,
policy.
I think that's
if it's
the best way to
referencing
safeguard it,
Yep.
yeah. If you really wanted to be well, then you could put like, no, actually, don't do
No.
that, I was gonna say like,
Okay, I just, the district shall provide parents or guardians with a copy of the most current ride brochure on physical
We
restraints.
wanna leave the link in there just because that,
I think we agreed to leave the link
Yeah.
in there
Okay.
as part of the
Yeah.
mediation agreement, so that at least for now have something to link to.
Okay, so are we good with this, knowing that Andrew is going to add some verbiage in here about, the complaint procedure? Okay, so
That-
then what we still need to do is the, JICD-R needs to be reviewed with recommendations for what needs to remain from that and pull into this. So Ken, I need you or Rachel or somebody to go through that, please.
For the appeal procedure, and I can draft a couple, do you guys have any thoughts on building level versus Rachel? Or Rachel's office, you wanna start at the building level and?
if, to appeal if a restraint was done. in one
Yes,
of
so
the-
I've got a child in elementary school, they've been restrained, I don't feel it was done appropriately, do I go to that building level principal, do I bring that right to Rachel?
There's a chance that building administrator was part of
That,
that, so I think it needs to go beyond the building.
yeah,
If
or
you're going
in
to
that building
appeal it.
level, that building principal oversees all the people who are involved in that,
Right.
that my
I would
gut
say,
tells me
I would say
a
it needs
higher
to go
level.
above and it needs to go to Rachel's office.
Okay.
Yep, and then of
I'll
course.
draft it that way, and if we
Yeah,
don't
I
like it,
think
we can
that
change
makes
it.
sense. And then, of course, like, Rachel could then go back down to the
Mhm.
principal and say, hey, I need you to
Right.
look into this, find out, what- like, you know, like, depending on the situation,
But I would
but
say it needs to go above, because they're all gonna be involved, and that's
Yeah,
part
I
of
think it's a
the
great
safety
call.
care.
there's no world where a principal probably isn't,
Right.
okay,
Okay,
Good talk.
so before we pick the date for the next meeting, I just wanna review the ones that we still need to go over, and they're in buckets. The next bucket is, attendance boundaries, assignment of student to schools, and school districting. Same thing, there needs to be a short-term and a long-term strategy in place to address those.
Can you repeat the attendance boundaries?
so it's JE,
Let me go back.
JCAC, JCA, JCAR, and JCAA.
Hold on one second, I'm trying to go back to find the agenda so I can follow this.
so it's GHINJ on the agenda.
Yep.
We also need to do JE and JER, which are the attendance and the attendance regulations. My question on that one is, if that's not done before school starts, is that something that cannot be done until the next school year?
For the attendance?
Mm-hmm.
No, we can continue to work on that.
Okay. And then for the transportation one, EEA, EEAEC, and EEA1, I think, that there needs to be a discussion.
So, I know it's almost 6 o'clock, can we briefly talk about that, and I can just kinda update the conversations that Michelle and I have had and some of the,
Sure.
so, the one that we, I wanna go back to, cause I did make some notes, so just give me a minute to go back and pull that one up. Too many things open on my computer.
I saw that you were in EEA1 and EEAC.
So if we look at EEA one, there's one addition that we put in there, and it's regarding training. So under the policy statement on
EE.
page, so it's page 1, in red, we added all bus contractors and drivers are required to participate in a minimum of annual training with the school department on bus safety protocols and school department policies, as well as anything else deemed pertinent by the transportation director or superintendent. Because we have nothing in writing that makes training mandatory. And then.
This is specifically for the bus contractors.
Yes, because this
Yep.
is the policy of bus contractors. The other policies that we looked at, we don't have specific policies around mini bus drivers or bus monitors, bus TAs. So what Michelle and I talked about is in our job descriptions, making sure it's specifically in the job descriptions about having the mandatory training that's in there. She holds training throughout the year, so it's more than once a year, but a minimum of annual training, and putting that in the job descriptions of the others, because we don't have specific policies around that.
But we're gonna. I think we should add one, or add something, or expand on something. I think job descriptions are good, but those are also not mandated by, that doesn't get up to the school committee level, that's at the
Yeah, I'm just saying,
administration
like, as
level,
of now,
yeah.
like, what's there, right? Like,
Yeah,
what we
yeah.
wanna change today.
I do think either adding to, I don't know where this lands, Andrew, with like the contract that we have with the
Bus company.
bus company, so I would check on that, cause I agree with Ken that it should be in here, but I also don't know. That might have to be something that we work out with the negotiation, or see if we can get a, it's not an amendment, what's it called?
Addendum.
Yeah,
You may have something in there already,
Yep.
you never know.
but my recommendation would be,
The other policy we thought was the EEA, which is student transportation, that goes along, that's about providing transportation to students in district. It talks about the distance from where a child lives to the school when transportation needs to be provided. Transportation, you know, would also be provided if there seems, I don't know where it's written in here, but we talked about like, if, you know, the whole thing happened around the Forest Park issue this year, like if there's a reason for transportation to be provided, we do have that flexibility within the policy to do so. The one thing she recommended, that we take out, but not right now, just because we're doing busing now, but for next year, is to remove radial from mile and just be a mile, just because it's more
Weird.
accurate. Yeah. But I would,
But I just learned about the circles.
yes, but we're saying like, let's just look at the actual mile to school. But we also said we wouldn't make that change now because we're in the middle of doing bus routes. But that would be something we would change to put in policy as effective for the following school year.
Going back to that one about like, sorry, I was following you, but what one were you on where it talked about the distances? It was the EAA?
Yep, that's EEA.
Okay.
So based on what I saw and sat through, I think there needs to be some more changes to these policies than what is reflected here. And I thought that one of the citizens' comments had some merit about having a meeting between contractors, monitors, and transportation, and I don't know whether that's something that's possible to do. But there seem to be a lot of disconnects among the various departments, and it might be helpful to have.
Well, and I think that's, so there's two different like things in my head. There's procedures, but then there's also policies.
Mhm.
And so I think for this level, like that I think is a very good
But I was gonna say
administrative
that
thing.
some of it's more
Yeah.
procedural.
But I
than
do
what would
believe
go
that we
in
have
the
policy gaps, and I
Yes.
think where the policy gaps for me definitely is one in the training.
Mhm.
What is trained on, how often, especially learning more about the fact that bus TAs and monitors aren't really regulated by the state, like
Mhm.
at the same certification levels, et cetera. I think that we either need to make a new policy or add to one of these transportation policies, and so I'm sure we could probably find some language in a different district that we could utilize. So that's a big one, and then definitely I think looking maybe for some basic policy level about like what it means to keep students safe, or what it means to, like I don't think that's anywhere.
It's not.
Yeah, and so I
Yeah.
definitely think we need to add something
for
about
sure.
those general things. I don't think it's to the nitty-gritty level of like the procedure part, but the general overall, I think we need to add some language for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I'm happy to look into other we cannot be the first people to have that conversation, so
Right,
we can look
right,
into
right.
things.
Um,
In addition to, like,
What-
some
what
administrative.
And I would say
Administration.
Michelle's doing
Yeah.
her also, I mean, she's going back
Yeah.
to Massachusetts where she worked, because Massachusetts actually has more
They're more
Yeah.
organized with
Yeah.
their.
regulations and rules than Rhode Island does, so she's pulling what is in place there.
Yeah. Mhm.
Good.
Because we do need to have something that states all of the adults on that bus are responsible for the safety of the kids.
Yep.
Because the EEAEC student conduct on buses, we do need to make a change in there regarding who is corresponding regarding the behavior on the buses. It all goes back to the building administrator. The policy states transportation supervisor, and that is not how we do it. It is the building administrator, because the school bus is an extension of the school day, so it's the
Mhm.
building administrators that are issuing a warning, they're the ones that are notifying parents, so that does need to be changed within
Does this have to be a separate policy, the conduct one?
Separate from what?
Other conduct policies that we have about student behavior? I'm just thinking as a parent, I would not think to look for multiple, like, my kid does X at school, my kid does X on the bus. Like, I'm not saying we would get rid of this, but like, is it a possibility that we could put them
We
all
could.
together?
We
So
could have
that
a
it's
school bus as an
clearer?
extension of the school day,
Yeah.
right, so we could do that.
Yeah, I don't know, and I wonder, cause I also worry about when you make an update in one spot, then it's like if we make it in the conduct one and then the committee doesn't make it here, then they might be not in alignment, like that makes me nervous. Like I think there should be a bus subcategory of maybe one of our other policies, but I wonder if there's an opportunity to condense for clarity for folks. And even if we carbon copied it just to be a part of it, it's like, I'm not saying we have to remove anything, but I do worry about like not having consistency.
And then the last one that we have outstanding on our agenda is the dress code. So hopefully we can, get most of these worked through at the next meeting, which is on the calendar for the next one is on the calendar for the 26th.
I think, and
You
might,
said tentative.
I might not be available that night. I need to check. I was looking through my calendar earlier today.
What about everybody else?
What night is that, I'm sorry?
It's a Monday.
The 26th?
Works for me.
We could also do the 19th if that's better.
If you do the 19th, no, that's not actually true. I was gonna say, if you do the 19th, you could get things to the school committee, but you'd have to pre-put them
I was
on
gonna say, we
with
could
the
put them
assumption.
on,
Yeah, you could
yeah.
put them on, and then I would just table them if not
If
needed.
they didn't get through, yeah.
That would be the benefit of doing the 19th.
Do we wanna try that,
I would defer to Ken.
Ken?
I also think the closer you get to the opening of school, like the 26th is,
The yuckier it gets.
yeah, like that's not great, I'm sure, for the administration.
I'm gonna be really honest, I'm just looking at time for us to review and do this, because next week is shot. Meaning like we have our retreat, we have a safety conference, like that is like booked already solid. And then if we're gonna say we're gonna come back on the Monday, that doesn't give us enough time to be looking
That's
at all
fine, the
these
26th
policies.
is fine.
So,
Can you do the
I-
26th?
I need to check.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure, I need to check on that day.
No, let's just leave it as is and we
Yeah.
can do that.
I just think, I think at some point we need to have a conversation of how many policies we're putting on this agenda and the reality of what we can do on top of all the other jobs we're doing. I'm hearing that from a lot of my team as we're looking through this, that, we're not able to really do this as well as we'd like to, because there's way too many policies getting put on for us to look at on top of everything else that we're doing.
Yeah, and I think
So-
you and I have had the conversation that once we get through the ones that have been on the agenda,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
we can,
But I think but we also keep adding more, and that's,
yeah.
it's
Some-
really,
some are
it's,
being added
it's
for-
really, I
Some
have to
have
say,
been
it's a
added.
challenge for all of us to do that on top
Yeah.
of everything else we're doing. So I think we need to really think about that of prioritizing these policies and timelines, so. That's what I'm saying, I think the 19th, holding it on the 19th would be too soon.
So we'll put it in the 26th. Rob and Andrew, can you make it on the 26th?
Mhm.
Good, 4:30?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. You have to vote.
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.